Let's stay with the story and perhaps unpack the human rights implications. Bring in now Section 27's Demichelle Petherbridge, who's an attorney with the organization and joins us now live via our video link. And Demichelle, I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly. Thank you very much indeed for making time to speak to us. Section 27 has really been at the heart of pushing for dignified and proper sanitation, quite literally for years. But you've been sounding the alarm around pit toilets since back in 2012. It's a bit sobering that it's taken more than a decade for us to get to a point where there are these tangible timelines that government officials are finally pledging.
Yes, good morning. Thanks so much for having me. You're 100% correct. It's really tragic that in 2024 we're still speaking about pit toilets. Because of our interest in the matter, we had actually gone so far as to launch litigation in Limpopo, where a lot of our focus is to force the Department of Basic Education in that province to move. And so in that province, we've seen quite a lot of progress, but we're definitely seeing that in different provinces, there's still a very big need to address this issue.
Yeah, and perhaps you can speak to us a bit more about that. I mean, you know, Mpumalanga, for example, is also finally, it appears, moving on this issue. They've committed to having all pit toilets eradicated finally by April next year. You say there's progress in Limpopo. What's the kind of national picture about how we're doing insofar as this issue is concerned?
So nationally, there are some provinces that are faring far better than others. Our well-resourced provinces like Gauteng and Western Cape do not battle with pit toilets. They don't battle with schools that have pit toilets only. They're also not battling with what the MEC had spoken about, this kind of hybrid situation where you have pit toilets still on the premises alongside other appropriate sanitation. So provinces like that are doing very well. But our very vulnerable provinces, our more rural provinces like Mpumalanga, like KZN, like Limpopo, and particularly the Eastern Cape are really struggling with this still. What was very interesting is in data that the department had released in July this year had told us that there were no schools that had pit toilets only in Mpumalanga. So I was quite concerned to hear that in fact data is wrong and there are 3 schools. So it makes me question the data accuracy, the accuracy of the department's data. And this is something we saw in Limpopo as well. Because of the High Court order, the department was compelled to undertake a serious audit on the ground of what really was happening and the status of schools. And if we're already seeing concerns with data, perhaps this is something the department needs to do at a national scale. I think that the problem is not only with our vulnerable provinces and the schools that have pit toilets only, but this problem that was raised earlier as well, that there are undemolished pit toilets at schools. And we see this as a problem across the board, except for Gauteng and Western Cape. We see this in the Northwest, we see it in the Northern Cape, we see it in provinces like KZN and Limpopo and Eastern Cape. So we're sitting with undemolished pit toilets that, even though they're not being used, are just as unsafe as pit toilets that are being used, because especially with our smaller learners, there's always that they can fall in those.
Absolutely. I mean, recently we heard of a story of, I think it was in the Eastern Cape, where a young child, sadly fell into one of those unused pit toilets and died. So, there should be as much of a focus on that infrastructure as there is on the toilets that are still in use.
Definitely. So I think this is really, this is going to be the next step for civil society to push for the demolition of unused pit toilets on premises, because this is really more of a national concern.
Without a doubt. For the provinces that are lagging behind, what's your reading around why that is? I mean, we heard there in Mpumalanga, the MEC speaking about there being an 18 million rand budget to see this through, and this is just for 3 schools. And, admittedly, I don't really know how much it costs to get rid of this, but in my mind, it doesn't seem like we have a money problem. It might be more of a political will issue.
I think you're right. I mean, recently we have become aware that there have been austerity measures, there have been budget cuts. We know that the department has to try and do a lot more with a lot less. But we are talking here about safety issues that are risking children's lives. And I think that this needs to be prioritized. And I think the lack of political will may be one of the biggest problems. Something that happened more recently is just after the elections, the Minister of Basic Education amended regulations that are called regulations relating to school infrastructure. And they basically say what exactly needs to happen for a school to operate properly, what elements a school must have, what kind of classrooms, what kind of sanitation, that they need power and electricity. And thankfully, in these regulations, the minister said that pit toilets are unlawful, but she has removed any kind of time frames within which pit toilets have to be removed. And what this means is that it's now up to provinces to decide how to do this. And this is really, really concerning, because it means provinces now have a discretion as to when they're going to fix school infrastructure generally, but particularly problems with pit toilets. And this is a really big concern for us. It means that civil society, school governing bodies, parents are really going to have to be alert and to report these problems to the districts, to their principals, because there's no longer any kind of obligation to eradicate pit toilets within a particular time.
Absolutely. And it's one thing to, I suppose, make pit toilets unlawful, and it's another to have actual people being held accountable, especially in the case of a worst case scenario where sadly somebody dies.
Yes, that's 100% correct. It all comes down to accountability, and it's a pity that the regulations aren't, that they don't have these timeframes. And I don't think that litigation should be the first resort, but we have seen a lot of success with litigation in holding the Limpopo Department of Education accountable.